I was like a kid in a candy store this morning because I get a chance to be able to sit down with one of my good friends, and I get to bring to you. We get to talk about the Super Bowl today. Obviously, the Super Bowl is coming up, but the number one Super Bowl party that's ever been, and it's coming in New Orleans. We get to talk about brain health, and I get to do it with not only one of my friends, but also he is the number one sports agent in the history of sports. This is the GOAT. This is the guy, and his resume precedes him. If you haven't heard of Leigh Steinberg, you haven't been on this planet for very long. But we get a chance to be able to sit down, talk football, talk brain health, some incredible things and technologies that are coming about in the brain health side of it, as far as concussions and things like that. But it's my honor and my pleasure to bring you, I think, one of the greatest in the world at what he does, if not the greatest, Mr. Leigh Steinberg. So why don't we get this party started?
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
What do let me read off some of these things for you. Steve Bartkowski, Steve Young, Troy Aikman, Warren Moon, Bruce Smith, Thurman Thomas, Cordell Stewart, Jeff George, Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Leinart, Mark Brunell, Ricky Williams, Howie Long, Eric Karros, Dusty Baker, Lennox Lewis, Oscar De La Hoya, John Starks, and Mr. Patrick Mahomes. What do they all have in common? I believe there's one man, and he is here with us, Mr. Leigh Steinberg. Thank you so much for jumping on the show.
Oh, always my pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's jump right in. We were talking before we started recording about brain health. This is something that is at the forefront of sports. I thought that it was so amazing. A couple years ago in LA, I got to come to your Super Bowl party, which was unbelievable. The experience of being around all the athletes that I grew up watching, but it had everything had a purpose, and one of the biggest purposes was the brain health part. And you were talking about the concussion protocol. Can you talk to us about some of those things that are coming and that you're going to be showing at the Super Bowl party this year in New Orleans?
So we do a brain health summit every year, which has neurologists and other experts, and we're trying to explore prevention, awareness, and cure. And so that's an hour and a half before the Super Bowl party. So this will be about the 20th. I had a crisis in conscience back in the late 80s, Kelly, because I represented half the starting quarterbacks in the NFL. They kept getting hit in the head. And when we went to doctors and asked, how many is too many? When should you contemplate retirement? They had no answers. So I started holding concussion conferences back in 1994, and people like Troy Aikman and Steve Young and Warren Moon and Drew Bledsoe came to the first one, and we've had a number since. And what we found is that 3 or more concussions occasion an exponentially higher rate of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, premature senility, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and depression. So I've called it a ticking time bomb and an undiagnosed health epidemic. And the point is not to stop a sport like football, it's just to make it safer. I believe it teaches great values. And it's not just football, it's hockey, it's AYSO soccer with young girls. This specter of concussion is very broad. So we will have that brain health summit, and I think this year we'll announce some interesting breakthroughs. For years, the thought was that once a brain became impaired and had a TBI or traumatic brain injury, it just went down a slippery slope to again, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, premature senility, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and depression. But now the exciting news is there's some breakthroughs that, through the theory of neuroplasticity, can rewire the brain. And one's called TMS, and it's little magnets against the brain. I call it Woody Woodpecker. And the other one is neurofeedback, which has been shown to be able, with a number of sessions, to again revitalize and rewire the brain. So we'll be talking about some of those breakthroughs, giving a couple awards to brain physicians or scientists who've come up with new protocols that help.
So when they're looking at the things, the neuroplasticity was something that really hit me because I read Sanjay Gupta's book about it, and they were talking about whether it be dementia or Alzheimer's, that they were considering it. Help me with the diabetes, type 3 diabetes of the brain. And they were saying that you could obviously, like you're talking about the rewiring part, are there things that athletes can do preventative, so then that way those things, their brain is going to be stronger when they do take the impacts?
So neurofeedback itself can be done to make a brain less apt to be concussed. And it can help with that. And we're looking for substances which will set the brain up to be less apt. There's a gene allele that shows a proclivity towards having a concussion. So you can test for that. Some brains just get concussed easier, and certain people shouldn't play the sports. In terms of a sport like football itself, you can look at not having young kids play football till they're a little older, because the brain's in formation at that point. So that starts you. Helmetry has been a partial help, but not an end-all and be-all, because people still get concussed with the concussion helmets on. They're playing football in the Ivy League without blocking and tackling and contact in practice or in training camp. And that eliminates about 40%. But I've discovered a whole group of healing modalities. I haven't discovered them, I've just experienced them. And it's hyperbaric oxygen, which has been shown to extend the telomeres in an Israeli study by 20% with 40 sessions and 25% with 60 sessions. It's red light therapy. It's something called Bimini, which puts oxygen into a bathtub, and then it's absorbed into the system. It's a process called Nanovi. All of these, Kelly, are anti-inflammatory. All of them have the effect of healing the body quicker, and they can do two things in sports. Number one is most games are coming down to the very end, and so the question is, can an athlete be more productive, focused, and elevate their level of play in critical situations? The other thing is that when players get injured in sports, because of salary caps, if you have a talented left tackle, his backup is going to be someone very lesser in talent than the starter. And so every game you can get those players back. So I'm going to take into professional sports and collegiate sports some of these healing modalities, and some of them have the effect, to your initial question, of having a brain less apt to get concussed.
So one of my friends, Baron Baptiste, he was one of the first performance coaches in the NFL with the Eagles, and he brought yoga into the NFL when Randall Cunningham was playing, and a lot of people, put their arms up against it and said, "Hey, this is weird. We don't know what's going on." What are the things right now that are the newer things that are coming in and, getting people ready that, may seem crazy now, but will be a normalcy in the future?
Well, first of all, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but it appears that the carnivore or keto diet might be something which changes people's metabolism. For years, there's been the food pyramid, which stressed a lot of carbohydrates and shunned any concept of fat. And there's new research coming out showing that if your diet's 50% fat and a lot of meat, that's much healthier because it's the way that the human species evolved. Now, trying to get myself to do that is hard because for years it's been low fat, no fat, and all the rest of it. But it turns out that grain and sugar are two things that human bodies didn't deal with until relatively recently in terms of thousands of years. And both of them cause the highest rate of obesity going. Hyperbaric oxygen, as I said, is now on the cutting edge of treating people, and that neural feedback can alter a brain and change it so the brain's less apt to get concussed, but also can wire productivity and the rest of it. So many of the modalities I mentioned are being brought into athletics and into sports, and we're creating a generation of robo athletes. No one ever thought you could have a body that big, that muscular, moving that fast. And so part of the problem is that the G-force at the line of scrimmage in a game is much more explosive and measurably higher than it was before.
So when I was at the your last Super Bowl party, or not the last one, but the one in LA, I got to meet an absolute there was legends everywhere, but one of my favorites was being able to meet Bo Jackson. And Bo was that athlete that, I mean, we had never seen anything like him, when he came on the scene, whether it was football or basketball, or football or baseball. Do you see that type of athlete becoming more and more common, or are we going to do you think that we'll see another Bo Jackson in our lifetime?
I do. I think that we're bringing athletes along bigger, stronger. Again, their nutrition is different. Their preparation is different. These new training techniques that they're using. Athletes are taking hyperbaric chambers home. They're taking red light chambers home. They're taking NanoV home. They're taking Bimini home. And so there are athletes spending virtually hundreds of thousands of dollars in the off season. It's part of why Tom Brady was able to play well into his 40s. I mean, he measured every molecule of food or drink that went into his body. He had advanced training techniques. So I think that they're there. One of the other pieces of news we'll be announcing at the Super Bowl party is the Concussion Foundation that I've just established. So what it's going to do, and people can go to LeighSteinbergFoundation.org if they're interested in being involved. It's got a medical committee, which right now has 10 doctors who are specialists. It's got an athletic committee with people like Warren Moon and Earl Campbell. And the goal is to raise funds to help at-risk people that are having brain problems that don't have the financial means to be able to get treated. So we'll treat them. At the same time, doing research into the field and continuing to look for breakthrough and raise funds for research. And I think we hope to make a real difference in the conversation.
Is one of the tough parts getting the teams on board, the league on board, or the players on board? Which one is the most challenging when you're going through that?
Active players really are in a state of denial. So they've been acculturated since Little League and Pop Warner to believe that real men stay in the lineup, real men uh, don't worry about long-term health. Long-term health's an abstraction. So you've got young people that for whom long-term health's an abstraction, and you've got athletes who grow up surrounded by other athletes who accept the fact that, let's just say, Kelly, that if we were talking about health, you and I could agree that long-term health would be the top value. And well below that would be the ability to have a pro career. And certainly lesser than that, the ability to play in a given season. And less than that, the ability to play in a given game. And the least important concept would be the ability to play this play. The athlete turns that on its head, and playing this play becomes the key. You got to be in the lineup. You got to be there. You got to ignore pain. You have to be stoic. And so the athletes are in a state of denial. A game like football is a traffic accident on every play. And so to play that sport, they blot out the concept. So it's difficult to get active athletes focused on this. My best allies are the mothers, the wives, the people around them.
So, is there going to be a positive impact of the NIL in college on this? Because then, I mean, it used to be a kid would come out of high school, they would play for 3-4 years, and they would hope to get to the league, changing their family, changing generations, things like that. Now we have kids that even in high school, on the cusp of college, starting to get these NIL deals where their families can be changed financially with them not even going pro. Is there going to be a positive impact on that or will that not matter at all?
I really think that NIL is a great example of the theory of unintended consequences. People act to try to improve things, and yet it ends up at the end that they didn't think about the fact that NIL is now used in high school to college recruiting in football and basketball. So basically, it's free agency for a high school player. And so you have the example of the new quarterback at Michigan who originally committed to LSU. And I think it was around allegedly $4 million they were going to give him there in NILs. And then Michigan had a big alum who was going to offer $14 million. And so the player decommitted to the first school and enrolled at Michigan. So what's happening is that the big four conferences with schools that have big alumni bases that will form collectives, they call them, and the collectives raise money to contribute to the NIL offer. So the big schools are going to sign all the best players, and you'll have four conferences playing at one level, and you have the rest of the schools playing at another. Athletes felt they were being ripped off on the college campus because if they couldn't work during the school year to supplement their income the way that non-athletes could. It's just against the rules. And so athletes from disadvantaged backgrounds ended up feeling like they might send part of the scholarship check home to their parents. And they couldn't afford to live like other students did. So they would have been happy with like $5,000 as a supplement. Instead, you have these multi-million-dollar packages, and it spreads out, but it's sort of a pyramid where the players at the top, those big stars, get the majority of the money, and it's much less at the once you go beyond the irreplaceable players.
Well, I know at one time, I think you still hold the record of representing 8 number 1 draft picks, right? And I don't think that anybody else has been able to do that, to my knowledge. Am I correct on this, Leigh?
Well, it was 8 picks that were the first player picked in the first round.
Yes.
In football, I ended up with 64 first-round draft picks.
Oh my gosh. So, okay, but you had 8 number 1 picks, like 8 number 1 picks, 64 in the first round. When you were preparing some of them for the draft, what's the difference in preparation today for a number 1 draft pick? Say, like, they're talking about Cam, possibly. They're talking about Shador. They're talking about, Hunter, Travis Hunter. And the greatest team of all time, the Tennessee Titans, have the first pick. How were you preparing a draft pick as opposed to the way that they're preparing them today?
So the way they prepare them today started some years ago, and it meant that there was a second season of scouting in a sport like football that consisted of all-star games, a scouting combine, pro football days back on the college campus in March, and there would be these events. Well, now players go off to training before they ever participate in the scouting, and they get enhanced nutrition. They go off to a training site. They work on speed, strength, bodybuilding, and they prepare them for the 40-yard dash, for how high they can do a vertical leap, a horizontal leap, a 3-cone lateral drill, and how many times they can bench press 225 pounds. And so there are sophisticated training techniques. And then with the quarterbacks, they go over play calling, play recognition, a variety of different things. They even coach them for the IQ tests that's given. And so these players go back to the scouting combine thoroughly prepped on each step of it, how they're going to perform. There are doctors involved at these training sites, because probably a third of players come out of there last year injured. So it's really extensive preparation, and then based on how a player does in that second season of scouting, at the scouting combine, at pro scouting day back on the college campus, and with individual, so it's expansive preparation and training, so that a player can move up in the draft.
So when they're going through it, and you're going through the draft process, are they checking the brain health of the kids right now preemptively when they're coming in? And if so, does that have any impact on where they would rank in the, as far as on the draft?
What a good question. No, but they should be. And so part of what the Concussion Foundation is doing is I will push the concept that they ought to do neurofeedback, they ought to do brain specs, that they ought to do EEGs, that they ought to do all of these things, because you have to start with the concept that the brain controls everything in the body. Every cell is set up by brain health, and it really impacts everything. And the reason those doctors didn't have the answers years ago is the brain's the last frontier of medical research. We know everything about every joint in the body, the hip and knee and elbow and shoulder and the rest of it. We've had complete understanding for years, but the brain is still being explored, and our knowledge of how it functions and what it does is greatly amplified with each passing year.
How are they testing for the concussions nowadays? I just heard of one recently. You know the man Lonnie Paxton. Lonnie's a friend. He was telling me about something that they're working with right now as far as a saliva test, where they can take the saliva and test and make, know if you were concussed or not. It's a pretty quick thing. How are they doing it right now? And do you see the advancements coming that will be a lot quicker or more effective in the future?
Again, a great question. There are breakthroughs happening every day. There's a technological race to see who can provide solution in this faster, and so basically, what you have in a sport like football is a concussion protocol. And so they have spotters up in the press box, spotting whether spotting players that appear to be impaired, so they can pull them off the field. I mean, the problem here has been that, and let me lay a premise out for you. There's the concussion, and then there's a subconcussive event. So every time a lineman hits a lineman at the inception of a play, at the line of scrimmage, it produces a low-level subconcussive event, a little bit of brain change. So you can have an athlete who plays left tackle, who plays in high school, college, and pros, have 10,000 subconcussive events, none of which are diagnosed and none of which the player is aware of. But the aggregate almost certainly does the same thing that getting knocked out 4 or 5 times does. So you've got this subliminal hidden factor that's occurring. But at any rate, they pull the player off, and then the question is, what's the best way of analysis? Can they do balance testing? Can they do saliva testing? Can they do a quick mini blood test? Or are there quicker ways to be able to recognize it? And then that player has to be pulled from the game and really should never get back out on the field unless they're seen as asymptomatic for rest, asymptomatic on an exercise cycle, asymptomatic, no symptoms on when they go out on the practice field before they ever go into a game.
The tough part about this, Leigh, and this is the thing that I want to talk to you about, is, obviously when you have a business and then you have health, those things are kind of contradictory at times. Like you were talking about earlier, where a player has it almost switched around. I need to be in on this play because if I'm not in on this play and I don't make that play, I could maybe not be on the team or I could lose value or whatever it is. So we have this business, we have the health part of it. When we have scenarios that almost slip through the cracks a little bit. Now, everyone's going to make a mistake, right? It's human. We've got human error. But a couple seasons ago, Tua got hit, and I mean, he visibly stood up, stumbled, and almost fell on his face. The team held him up and then walked through. Now, Tua's a pretty, prevalent person in the NFL. How does that work as far as from a fan standpoint, they're like, oh, well, Tua is marketable. He needs to be in the game. He's going to be able to help sell tickets. So therefore, we're going to look at him different. From a fan's perspective, sometimes they see that. From your perspective, how do you see it?
I think that the role of an agent and having a fiduciary responsibility to a player has to extend beyond the bank book. It has to extend to the concept of having a player live a healthy life later. And here's why the brain is so important. We know that athletes will have their share of bumps and broken down joints in the body to the hip and knee and the rest of it. And when they turn 40, have problems picking up their child. They'll have aches and pains. It's another thing not to be able to recognize that child. And the brain is the center of character, memory, what it means to be a sentient human. So I believe that you have to be proactive until truth to players and make them aware of their mortality. And it's much more important to me to have a client who has a normal life and productive after football than that he continue to play when there's too much risk.
So as you were speaking, this just came to mind. So I think about Troy Aikman, one of your clients, Steve Young, one of your clients. I look at Warren Moon, one of my favorite quarterback of all time on the greatest team of all time, the Houston Oilers. You know that, Titans, that's where we're at. But I look at all these guys, and the last time when I was at the last Super Bowl party that I was at with you was in Las Vegas, and that was last year. And Warren Moon was there. He looked younger than he did when he got through. Were these conversations that you were having with a Troy Aikman, with a Steve Young, with a Warren Moon? What conversations were you guys having during their career? Because those guys, literally, they look younger than they seem like. I mean, especially Warren. When Warren walked through, I was thinking, man, I mean, it's unbelievable. Were you guys talking about the longevity, and were you talking about brain health at that time when you were working with them?
Absolutely, because we were always talking about second career,
Mm.
and we were talking about, could you make an impact as a player, and this generation be the owner? So a couple of the players that I have are actual minority owners of teams. The preparation in the off season so they'd have a successful life. But these are also athletes who have taken care of themselves and availed themselves of some of the modalities that we've been talking about. They've been, very careful. Troy Aikman posted a blood transfusion that he did that made him more vital. They're using stem cells and a variety of means to stay young, and hyperbaric oxygen, which we mentioned. So you're getting athletes who are very sophisticated and understand how to rehabilitate their bodies.
So you alluded to it earlier about the foundation that you just started, and that you're working on right now, because when we hear about a Tom Brady spending, let's call it in the millions, to be able to keep his body in place, we hear about the LeBron James that's spending over $1 million a year. What about to the normal person that says, well, I don't have access to that. Does my body just deteriorate? How does this become the norm, where it becomes available to people that maybe aren't an elite athlete?
So every one of the modalities we're talking about, I do hyperbaric oxygen 3 to 4 times a week. I do Nanovi. I do different things. A little bit pricey, but what happens is if we can validate the efficacy of these concepts in sports, it will send a message to weekend warriors, to baby boomers, to other people that are already using some of this. When I say it's pricey, it's like everything else. If the demand is much higher and the many more people are using these things, the pricing drops, right? The same way that it did for computers and television sets and everything else. So it's possible for the average person to use neurofeedback to get a strong sense for where their brain health is, to get evaluated, and anybody can do that. And I think that young kids born today will probably live to 130 because they've got the preventive mechanisms to do it, so that some of what I'm talking about is available to anyone. And you'll see a proliferation. I've been working with a group called IQ Minds, and they're going to take biofeedback out and have it being done in clinics and everything else, so that you can walk in, Kelly, to one of these clinics and get yourself evaluated and see where you are in terms of age and brain health, and probably live for a much longer time with greater cognitive clarity. Yeah, this revolution is here now.
So one of my friends, her name is Tina Black. She was a owner of some of the Paul Mitchell schools, and they started to work with Dr. Amen, who was there in Orange County. And it was the first time that I had ever had anyone tell me that they went and did a brain assessment as far as their brain health. How important is it for the non-athlete, I mean, the mom, the dad, the kids at whatever age, how important is it for them to get evaluated with their brain health so they can start to put things in place to become, so they don't run into challenges in the future?
Very important to do it. Dr. Amen is one of my heroes. I went to his clinic. I had a brain spec because just in normal life, I had 2 or 3 falls, which were concussions. And so I wanted to make sure that I understood where my own brain health was. And so he's got an excellent program. This IQ Minds is going to be a very dynamic force in the field. This movement to treat brain health is expanding to everywhere. So you'll be able to go in and do the things we talked about, whether it's neurofeedback or TMS, the same way, and just consider it preventative medicine. But for young kids, remember this. The reason there's a cautionary note about collision sports for young kids is that brain is in formation. And if that brain gets a concussion at 15 years of age, the consequences are more severe. It takes 3 times longer to recover. It can actually have a deleterious effect on the development of the brain itself. So I see a day where we all are using this preventative medicine. We all are integrating part of it, and the capacity for human productivity, potential creativity is sky high.
So when I remember going to your first Super Bowl party, well, that I got to go to, it was there in LA. And again, it was unbelievable. I mean, I'm walking through, I look over, Bo Jackson is standing there. I look over here, Edgerrin James is there. I'm walking by, and I've got my Houston Oilers hat on, and I walk by, and Warren Moon is standing there, who happens to be one of your best friends. As I was going through, everyone was so excited to be able to see all these people. And the most important thing that was there was brain health, right? And I remember going in, my buddy Baron Baptiste, I was telling you, he was responsible for bringing yoga in because Jeff Lurie hired him with the Philadelphia Eagles at the time. When he told me when he went in, the challenge was it was something new, right? And it was something different. And so a lot of people were resisting it until Reggie White and Randall Cunningham said, hey, this guy is good. He's doing good. We're actually using it. It's amazing. And then people started to adopt it. Who are those champions for you right now that are those kind of athletes that are going to really turn the tide?
Well, I think part of it is going to be owners that own franchises that are concerned with higher productivity, very competitive, and so they'll be looking for the edge. So again, I plan to talk to owners in football and hockey, and talk to the people at AYSO. So I think that it's going to be, when this becomes institutionalized, and you walk into an NFL training facility or Major League Baseball or any of the rest of it, and what you have is that this is just the preventative protocol and healing protocol. So you prophylactically are setting up the brain, the circulatory system in a heightened way. And this becomes a new standard. And like I said, if it validates in sports because of the power, I mean, we've reached a point where pro football is not only the most popular sport, it's the most popular form of televised entertainment. 70 of the top 100 Nielsen rated television shows last year were NFL football. And 57 million people watched the Buffalo Kansas City game on Sunday. You probably have 130 million people watch the Super Bowl. And so it's become the passion of the country. That's why we do the Super Bowl party. The Super Bowl's become a convention of Americana. So one of the things we do is put together big business, big politics, big sports, big entertainment, all of them in under one roof. And one of the things we do is we give humanitarian awards. So Gail Benson, the owner of the Saints, Sean Payton, the coach of the Broncos, the new Sandra Douglas Morgan, the new president of the Las Vegas Raiders, Nate Wiggins from the Baltimore Ravens, all will get awards based on what they do in the community. And so we're trying to highlight that. We're raising money for the National Urban League, and we're hoping to move a family into the first home they'll ever own. So we're trying to benefit New Orleans. We'll have a brain body lounge where you can see a hyperbaric chamber, you can see Nanovi, you can see some of these new treatments and modalities. And so it's trying to be, at the same time that we're partying, we're trying to be education oriented and expose new concepts to people. And it's a daytime party with ambient sound. It's not noisy or overcrowded, and it's a networking bonanza.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, to the ones that I've got to go to, it is. I'm sad that I missed Arizona when you did Arizona. I wasn't able to go there, but like I said, L.A. and Las Vegas, and when we went to it, it was unbelievable. Anytime, so it's funny because my son's really into cooking right now, and he's only 11 years old, and he's talking about A5 Wagyu, and I'm like, where do you know about A5 Wagyu? Well, he's watching YouTube channels, and he's like, oh, well, you got to understand, Dad, Guga cooks it this way, and he sears it for a... Who is that athlete right now that's in the league that is championing the brain health kind of situation that will make it cool for all the younger kids? Because I can say to my son as much as I want that A5 Wagyu is amazing, but once his YouTube guy said it, it was law. Does that happen in sports also?
Absolutely. So the whole concept of athlete as role model is it has been the basis of our practice. So I ask each athlete, are you willing to tackle some problem and use your high profile to make a difference? So years ago, I had Lennox Lewis, the heavyweight champion, cut a public service announcement that said, real men don't hit women. And that could do more to trigger behavioral change as relates to domestic violence than 1,000 authority figures ever could, because he's tough and he's macho and he's telling them that they have to be respectful in terms of women. Oscar De La Hoya and Steve Young put together a campaign that said prejudice is foul play. And so they were able to promulgate those values. And so we asked the athlete to go back to the high school, collegiate, and professional community and set up programs that enhance the quality of life. So Warwick Dunn, the retired Atlanta Falcon running back, has just put the first 200th single parent and their family into the first home they'll ever own by making a down payment. Patrick Mahomes has 15 in the Mahomies, where They help at-risk kids, school lunch programs, uh, and kids that are in hospitals. So these athletes can be profound in terms of their impact on the public because we bring these visages larger than life into people's front rooms. And those athletes, they're not modeling that you can be a football player or a baseball player or a basketball player. They're modeling that all of us can make a positive difference in the world, if we try to heal pain and change circumstances for the better. My father used to have a saying. He'd say, if you're waiting for someone to make a difference or to um, change a situation, and it can be as small as picking a piece of trash off the floor, as big as racism or the environment. He'd say the tendency is to wait for they or them to fix the problem. Older people, political figures, someone else. He'd look at me and he'd say, the they is you, son. You are the they. You're responsible for being active in trying to make a positive difference in the world.
Now, most people with this question, it would be a shot in the dark, or this would be hey, I want to shoot for the moon and hopefully I'll hit the mountain. But all these people and every one of them know you. If you could have 3 to 5 athletes today, like that are playing right now, whether they're in their first couple years or second years, whatever it is, that they would stand up and they would be the champions for brain health, who would that lineup be for you?
It would be in football, it'd be the quarterbacks, because we've made them like movie stars. So if you could get that generation that is Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert and players like that, they would be on the cutting edge. So hopefully we'll have players at our Super Bowl party, and they'll go to the Brain Body Lounge and they'll see one of these things and think about it, because brain health is health the same way that mental health is health. And to the extent that we can have more consciousness about these issues, it augurs well for the ability for people to live happier lives.
So if you got, literally, like if you got the quarterbacks that you were talking about, so if you took Lamar and you took Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and who else did we say?
Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, and Ben Patrick, and right.
And imagine that. Like that's the call out to every one of you guys, because honestly, like if my son saw Josh Allen say, hey, brain health part on YouTube, I guarantee you he would come to me and be like, Dad, could we go and check it out? Whereas if I'm going to take him down the road to do it, he's going to, I like to think that my son listens to me a little bit. Let me ask you about organization wise, because we saw a shift in an organization, right? The Washington Commanders. We saw this shift happen, and a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, Jaden Daniels once in a he's unbelievable, like to be able to see. But it was an organizational change. How important is the organization and culture, not only to the winning part of it, but to the culture and to this movement as far as brain health for moving forward?
It's incredibly important. Look, if they were going to have a draft in sports like football or baseball or basketball, and they really wanted to be impactful, you would draft owners, general managers, and front office people, and coaches. Because the owner that's got vision and stability and the ability to hire the right general manager who knows every aspect of player transactions, from how to draft to how to trade to how to manage the salary cap to the rest of it, and then a coach that has a system. any system can work, but it's got to be consistent and visionary and well thought out. And they can play the game different ways. But look at the effect that Dan Quinn and a new administration had with the Commanders. Look at the effect that Sean Payton had when he went to Denver. Look at the effect that Jim Harbaugh had when he went to the Chargers. All of these teams were essentially the same. In Washington's case, they found a new quarterback, fortunately. And with Sean Payton, he drafted his own quarterback. But essentially, they were similar teams the year before. But all of a sudden, they started winning. And it was the culture. It was the individual motivation. It was the feeling of being part of a larger passion and journey. And they got the same players to simply play at a higher level and organization. So it's everything. And it's why in sports they have a concept of parity that they've tried to push, right? So they have the draft reverse order and the way the teams finish. They have salary cap limits, and all this is supposed to make teams come up in terms of stature and then have some great years and then have to rebuild and come back up. But look at a team like the old New England Patriots, and then look at a team like the look at teams like the Kansas City Chiefs. Anyway, we're coming to the end of our hour.
Well, I want to thank you so much. I started the podcast because my two kids, Maddox and McKenna, and I would love if you could give them a little piece of advice from one of the greatest in the world.
Look inside yourself and see what's really important to you in the world, and just know that in life you should do what your passion is. And if you can figure out what your passion is, then you can make a positive difference in the world. And this world can be a better place because you've been here.
Leigh, I want to thank you so much. If you're listening right now, the Super Bowl party in New Orleans, one of the greatest things that you'll experience. But what I want you to do is go there for the real reason, not only the networking, not only all the incredible experiences, but also brain health needs to be at the forefront of every single thing that we're doing, whether it be sports or just in our communities. Leigh, you're an absolute icon. I appreciate you, and you're officially off the hot seat.
Thank you.
Have a great day, sir.
Thank you.
Peace.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake.